Welcome to the very first 10 in a row podcast. My name is Graham Wilson, and you're probably asking yourself, what is this all about? Well, we will tell you. Joining me is the green and white writer, Paul Larkin, and good afternoon, Paul.
Good afternoon, Graham.
All right, so what are we doing with this? Essentially, the premise is to have 10 topics lined up so that we can debate, discuss, and mull over the issues of the day with Celtic in very concise, short 5-minute clips. Once that 5 minutes is up, we stop and move on to the next topic. So we can keep it nice and tight and compact. And in the process, we can debate, hash out. Hopefully it's going to be heated, honest. And personally, I think it's an excuse for Paul Larkin to rip the piss out of me for an hour, but
I don't need an excuse.
Who does? But without any further ado, let's move on to the first topic. First topic is, will Joe Ledley sign a contract extension and remain at Celtic for an extended number of years, Paul?
Yes, I think he will. I think he's making the right noises. He's already talked about the fact that he would rather beat Celtic, winning leagues, winning cups, playing in the Champions League, rather than meandering around the lower reaches of the English Premiership. I think that it would be good to get Celtic to probably put another 3 years on that contract. Joe would still have a great market value at the end of it. I think his heart's at Celtic. I think he's firmly bedded in his roots in Glasgow. I think he's loving life at Celtic, and I think that he would be a popular choice for the fans if he remained at Celtic Park for a very long time.
But what are we going to pay him, though? I mean, the reports and the rumors are that he's on $30,000 a week. I mean, he's obviously going to look for a pay rise with Cardiff. Yeah, obviously that's where he came from. With them coming up to the Premiership, they would obviously be able to offer him more money. I think that if they came in, they could probably double his wages. And with that being said, going home, double his wages, playing the EPL. I don't think that he would think twice about that. If that offer comes in, and I don't think Celtic would think twice about it. If we keep him for another year and then he goes on to the open market, he has another year that we know that he's capable of, we're going to lose him for nothing. I don't think Peter Lowell's ready to do that. And quite frankly, I love Joe Ledley, but I don't know that we can pay him more than $30,000 a week. I think that sets a dangerous precedent for our business model, unless we're going to change our business model. But I mean, can we count on Champions League money every year? I'm not so sure. For me, I would not be surprised if he's gone at some point in the summer.
I think the way around it is you offer him the same deal as he's currently on, bearing in mind we actually got him for nothing as well. So we never paid out a big transfer fee for him. And then you insert a clause in the contract that says, but you can go for this amount of money. You make it a decent amount of money, you put it in the 6-7 million bracket, which is nothing for the Premiership teams, and you say to him, in real terms, we're probably looking for 10, we'll take 6, but we'll still give you the same money. I mean, if people reach that clause in your contract, then you can go. What I will say as well is the fact that, Joe Ledley has been on a good wage at Celtic, as you've just mentioned, for the entire time in his career. And when Joe is an old man, it's no his bank balance he's going to be looking back on, which is already very healthy. It's going to be the medals, it's going to be the memories, and it's going to be the prestige of playing for a club like Celtic. That's
going to be the thing that separates Joe Ledley from other players. I mean, obviously comments coming out today from Victor Wanyama talking about, the contract that was levied to him was unacceptable, and he, perhaps might be looking for a transfer. We already know that Gary Hooper, I mean, his silence is saying everything that needs to be said about it. He's gone. But I think that Joe Ledley understands that a bit more he doesn't say much. He is typically the quiet type, but you get the sense that he appreciates, just how much the club means to the support and how much opportunity he has, not just, to win medals within Scotland, but to play in the Champions League on a regular basis. He's never going to have that if he goes to Cardiff or wherever else.
Yeah, and I think the fact that he's already played for Cardiff and he understands the massive difference between the sizes of the clubs, that, obviously when you're on $30,000 a week or whatever it is he's on, you can afford to make these kind of decisions. You can afford to turn down maybe $50,000 a week that Cardiff could offer him and things like that. But at the end of the day, Joe's still a pretty young player and he's still got a big move, at least one big move in him. And I think that, he's perfectly settled at Celtic. And I don't think that, you could obviously have a scenario with Joe Ledley where it's like, okay, I'll go for the riches of the Premiership, and then Cardiff get relegated and he's back where he started. So, maybe Joe's actually started to thought about it with his good lady and stuff, and as I said, they've got the roots in Glasgow now, they're perfectly settled, they're perfectly happy, and said, look, we could be winning this league for the next 4 or 5 years. I want to be part of that. I want to have a shot at Champions League every year. I want to play in the big games. I want to play in the Nou Camp and in places like that and stuff, and he's never going to get that at Cardiff. And he might be one of these guys that do buck the trend if Cardiff come in with the offer and say, you know what, I'm actually really happy. I understand it's not an ideal scenario where he's only got 1 year left in his contract.
Well, and he's playing for half the wages. I mean, in a hypothetical scenario, is he going to take less?
No, I don't think he'll ever take less. I mean, I don't think there's a player in the world who would take less at this stage in his career. But I think if you maintain that wage, look at bonus deals and stuff like that, then it will be. I mean, look, he's not on Skid Row anytime soon. So, as I said, it's easy to say, well, I'm quite happy to play for Celtic and turn down the riches of the Premiership when you're getting 30 grand a week. I mean, that's an easy decision. But Joe doesn't strike me as the type of guy that would drop the boat or suddenly angle for a move or anything like that. But at the end of the day, he is a Welsh-born player, and he obviously might want to go home at some point and stuff. I just don't think it's the right time in his career to go home now, and I don't think he wants to go down to Cardiff for 1 year in the Premiership, where he's going to be fighting and scrapping and all that, the rest of it, other than being at a team who is kind of in for the big trophies and kind of wants to win every game.
I think he's been silent throughout his career at Celtic, and it might be a silent exit. We'll have to keep an eye on it. I would not be surprised. Next topic. Out of Hooper, Wanyama, and Forrest, who's the one you'd choose to keep if you could only keep one?
The one I would choose to keep would be Gary Hooper. And for simple reason, I think Gary Hooper has been kind of tainted by the fact that it does look like he wants to leave. And people are kind of like saying, well, if he wants to go, fine, that kind of thing, which is what most football fans do when they hear that about any player at their club. But what I will say is this is a guy who scored 60 goals in 2 seasons. And I don't care what anybody says, you cannot just go out and replace that with any guarantees whatsoever. An example being, we paid 1.5 million for Daryl Murphy, he scored about 3 goals for Celtic. So, you can't overestimate how much of an influence Gary Hooper has been on our success in the last couple of years. And Neil Lennon has said he'd made it his priority to keep Gary at the football club. People might say, well, he's just saying that to try and get the transfer fee up and say we didn't want to sell him, etc., etc., etc. It's not an ideal situation, I don't think. The fact that he's only got a year left in his contract, I don't think he's the same as Joe Ledley. I think he has got itchy feet. I think he might want to go to the Premiership. But if in an ideal world, as your question stated, I'd keep Gary Hooper.
Look, I mean, all three of these players have certain aspects that they bring so much to the side, and to lose them would be a huge miss. The points that you brought up about Gary Hooper are exactly spot on. I mean, and it's not easy to replace that sort of goal scoring tally. I mean, Scott McDonald. Think back to the fantastic year that he had. Even he couldn't replicate that 1 year. Gary Hooper's been able to do that over an extended period, and I think that's incredibly valuable. But I think that's much easier to sort of replace. I mean, look at over the course of Celtics history. We've had prolific goal scorers, one after another. We've had midfield generals throughout. I mean, the Paul McStays, the Bobby Murdochs, the list goes on. Neil Lennon. But what we've missed throughout, I mean, up until Arthur Boric was, and you can go back to Lisbon Lions before you'd find another keeper that had the same sort of prominence, the same sort of stature and upside and effectiveness as Fraser Forster. No question about it. I think that Fraser Forster is a better keeper than Arthur Boric ever was. At this point, I think that his what he's meant to this club. I mean, let's think about the new camp. I mean, everybody talks about the fantastic performance that Samaras and that many of our outfield players had. If it wasn't for Fraser Forster and both legs of the Barcelona ties, we would have gotten absolutely gubbed. He stood on his head consistently. He saves penalties. I mean, it's almost like when there's a penalty going up against us, I feel like we have a 50-50 shot of him saving it. He's gotten us points. How rare that is for not just for a Celtic keeper, but for any keeper generally to actually get a club points. I think that's far more difficult to replace than if Wanyama or Hooper left.
Yeah, it might well be, but I might be drunk or you might be drunk. But you didn't give me Fraser Forster as an option in your thing at the start.
I said Hooper, Wanyama, or Forster.
You said Forrest.
I misspoke.
See, this is typical of you. You're trying to throw me off beam straight away because your point was absolutely ridiculous.
I got to do something.
Well, Fraser, it's a different ballgame with goalkeepers, right? I mean, I rate Fraser Forster, brilliant goalkeeper and all the rest of it, and I know it's harder to get goalkeepers there. I mean, we used to go through periods of just giving guys trials. I mean, we gave a trial to Pleta Koza, who played against Scotland on Friday there. He's a Croatian national goalkeeper, but we gave him a trial. And it isn't easy. I mean, I'd like to see Fraser Forster stay at the club forever, but I just think, Fraser Forster can keep you a clean sheet, but this game's about winning, and you have to score goals, and Gary Hooper scores goals, and that is not easy to replace. You talk about we've had a lot of great strikers over the years and stuff. We've also had people like Marc-Antoine Fortuny, and we've also had Morten Rasmussen, and we've also had Mo Bangura, who cost us in the region of about £8 million. And what did that get us? Nothing. Where did they all go? Nowhere. We have got a prize asset at our club in terms of goal scorers. And you look at that Scottish Cup final, there's a ball came over, a goalkeeper's going for it, 2 defenders are going for it, there's Gary in there twice, boom, 2-0, game over.
Yeah, I'm looking at the email that I sent you, with this, and it clearly says Forster. So I think this is an excuse.
Yeah, well, clearly
you know that my point was better than yours. I think this is a deflection. Look, the bottom line is, who are we going to replace? Who do we even have in the system? I mean, is Lucas Zaluska going to be able to keep us in games if we make it back to the group stages in the Champions League, which is where we need to be? Is Lucas Zaluska going to be the one that's going to save us points? Is he going to save penalties? When we get these dodgy penalties called against us all the time in the SPL.
No, of course he's not. But then Lucas Zaluska would not be the replacement if Fraser Forster left the football club. When you go out and try and find somebody else. Jesus. That's the nature of the beast.
I hate the off season. I've been listen. Hooper's gone.
You start rambling about your Tom Sawyer hammock stuff. That's the reality. You need to score goals to win football matches.
It's going to be much easier to replace a Gary Hooper than if you let the ball in the net, it doesn't matter how many goals you score.
Well, yeah, it does because you can outscore them.
All right, that was a shambles. Next topic. Would anyone care if or that to this point we haven't signed Johnny Russell yet if he wasn't a Celtic supporter?
Well, I certainly wouldn't because I didn't really want to sign him anyway. I think that.
Well, there's a lot of people out there that want to.
Yeah, well, I mean that's fine, but I'm looking at ability. I couldn't care less if he's if he supports Mars. It's Johnny Russell is a decent SPL striker, but one thing has been proven this season, and it's this: whatever you do against SPL clubs other than Celtic does not mean jack shit that when you play Celtic. The prime example of that, Lee Griffiths. Lee Griffiths joined something. Lee Griffiths became a trivia question, which is what do you bring to cup finals that you never ever see? And that is that losing teams ribbons. I'll add Lee Griffiths into that because I watched that game for 90 minutes and I never seen Lee Griffiths. And that's a guy people say, oh, let's sign Lee Griffiths. He scored this amount of goals and all that kind of thing. He scored one offside goal against Celtic and suddenly we're supposed to sign him. Same as Johnny Russell. They're not good enough to play for Celtic. It's as simple as that. Anthony Stokes and Gary Hooper are far better players than them. You've obviously got Gorgeous Georges there. I mean, can you seriously tell me if Gary Hooper stays at this football club that Lee Griffiths or Johnny Russell was going to out-suck him?
Well, but all this is under the context of Gary Hooper leaving. Everybody already has Gary Hooper leaving. That's why
Johnny Russell's a replacement for Gary Hooper.
A lot of people think so.
On what grounds?
And that's exactly the crux of my question. I think that there's a load of people out there who, because Johnny Russell has pictures taken of him in Celtic Park, they think, right, he's going to play for the Strip. He knows what it means. He's a Celtic supporter, and we need to bring him in. Oh, and he's only $700,000.
Sign me. I can deal with that. I can go out and play for the Strip, and I can go out and die for the cause and all that. That doesn't mean I'm good enough to play for Celtic.
You are clinical too. Route one.
But Johnny Russell might be a good player, but can we afford? I mean, it's kind of like, all right, sorry, whatever he's agreed with Derby, $700,000, whatever. It's nothing for Celtic. But is Johnny Russell a project? How much better is Johnny Russell going to get?
Well, I agree. I mean, I think there's a little upside to him, but think about it under the context of the other strikers that we're rumored in for. We're being rivaled by some of the EPL sides for them. Who's the rival clubs going in for Johnny Russell? It's just Derby, to my knowledge. I mean, are we the rivals of Derby for the creme de la creme of Scottish players?
I think you bring up an interesting point here as well with the whole. Every time you get linked to somebody, there's a rash of EPL clubs that get linked with them, and I think that
why wouldn't they?
Because John Parker appears to be their scouting network as well as ours.
Exactly.
You look at the players that we go for and they go, he must be good, and then they try and go for him.
Exactly.
And I didn't think Johnny Russell's in that bracket. I mean, listen, I almost got called up for the Scotland squad on Friday, and Johnny Russell never. So, there has to be a point where you go, right, okay, he's a set support, he goes to the games and all that kind of thing, but actually, can he improve our team? And what we need to be doing next season is improving our team. We've got 3 qualifiers in the Champions League to come. They're not going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination. And we need to improve. We need to keep improving. We can only sign so many projects, Sometime, if you're going to sell Gary Hooper, and that's what we're talking about, you have to replace those goals. It's simple. And if Johnny Russell's going to score 31 goals, good luck to him. I just didn't see it.
No way. And God's green earth is Johnny Russell going to be able to step in? And I mean, let's remember Gary Hooper was 22 when we brought him in. So this whole thing about, Johnny Russell's young, he's going to get better. We need players who are good now, that can replace Gary Hooper. Gary Hooper scored goals by the bucket load when he first came in. That's what we need. We need a young player with some upside, but who can get the job done right now. Johnny Russell can't do that. I make the argument that David Goodwillie was a better striker at the time that he left Dundee United, and nobody ever cared that we weren't in for him. And it's clear. Well, it's clear what he is. That's the difference. Johnny Russell, just because he's a Celtic supporter, just because he's a Coatbridge madman, we need to have him at Celtic Park. It's nonsense. It's a waste of $700,000.
I mean, look, David Goodwillie, if you want to bring him in, I'll bring him when I go next week to a nightclub and I think I'm going to get beaten up. I'll bring David Goodwillie, but I'm not going to bring David Goodwillie in a Celtic Park again because he's another joker.
You're going to jail.
The reality is this. We are a Champions League club. Our structure is based on playing in the Champions League every single year. And at some point, we have to bring in players who we know that can compete in the Champions League. Now, we didn't know that about Gary Hooper, but when Gary Hooper signed for us, it was a different scenario. We had to win the league. We had to win the league again before we could actually think about getting in the Champions League. And Gary Hooper was one of the men that helped us do that. I just didn't think at this time in his career that Johnny Russell, he needs a few more years progression. And let's also not forget that the guy who probably set up 90% of Johnny Russell's goals, John Daly, is now retired to top level football. So there's another reason why not to sign him.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's a pass on Johnny Russell. Good luck to him at Derby or wherever he winds up, but not at this point for Celtic. Next topic. Are these mini tours overseas a hindrance to Celtic's European endeavors? Your thoughts, Paul?
Well, they weren't last season, obviously.
Exactly. Or in 2006, or in 2007.
No. I mean, look, I'm not overly keen on Celtic going to Australia or going to America in a pre-season in terms of I spoke to Sean Maloney about this once where he talked about a schedule. It was absolutely horrendous. Playing in New Jersey, then you were flying to Seattle, and then you were coming back to Toronto. That's nonsense. Having said that, having lived in America, I know the importance of the fans. I know that we have to get there and connect to the fans there in Australia and other places like that. And I know how much income it brings to the club, but I would like to see us get to the point where we are structuring our pre-season solely around qualifying for the Champions League and winning the SPL.
I would agree completely, and you bring up an interesting point out of that as well, where it's not just going to America, but it's what you do when you come here. I think that it can be much better thought out when you do come over. I think last year was a good template. Come over, play one game in one of the East Coast cities, or even if you got to go to Chicago, it's just another hour on the plane. But these West Coast jaunts, that's really where it takes it out of you. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from Australia. I think at certain points we need to go to Australia because there's a huge population of Celtic supporters down there that you have to go see. But when you come over to America and you're flying all over America, I think there's this understanding, well, it's just the same country. Well, yeah, but a flight from Boston to LA is 6 hours. That doubles the amount of flying. So you go through jet lag, you get yourself somewhat accommodated, and then you have to go through jet lag all over again. I don't think that makes sense, and that's what we've done in the past. Philadelphia, all the way to Seattle, Washington, and then back over to Canada, and who knows what the hell's going up in Toronto right now. They got crackheads for mayors. I think that if you're going to do it, you do it smart, but once you do it smart, it's very, very manageable. These players go off to Qatar or Dubai or whatever it is, which is actually further from Glasgow than it is a flight from Glasgow to Philly, just for the weekend. So if you come over, you play one game, or even if you do like Philly and New York, it's not that big of a deal, and then you go right back. I don't see any problem with it. You're serving the supporters over here. There's a huge segment of the message boards and Twitter who was like, oh, we cannot play these preseason friendlies. It takes everything. It's absolute nonsense. Last year was the proof source that it can be done. 2007, 2006, we make the last 16 of the Champions League, and guess what? We came to America as well. It can be done.
Well, look, we're in the fortunate position on the show where we've got some power and influence. It looked like last season when we went to Philadelphia, the first thing Peter Lawwell did was have a sit-down meeting with you. Can you not just go over and
We weren't sitting down.
Well, can you not just tell him the structure and how you would like it to be, how you would like it to see in terms of Celtic coming over there, and just get them told?
Well, first off, we were standing up the whole time, and I actually essentially stalked him and then broke in. I did have some help from the Rebel journalist, Phil McGillivray, and that's always handy. But listen, I told him I mean, I've gone over this. I told him the opportunity that Celtic has over here, with people who, not just expats, but people who sound like me, who are as nuts as I am. We want to give money to the club, not just with these overseas tours, but with the merchandising, etc. And the club doesn't make it easy. And when you hear people say, the fact that the club comes over here and it takes away from their performance, it's absolute nonsense. I agree that when they come over and they're flying all over the place, that's not helpful. But strategic flights over here, and I mentioned this. I said thank you. My first comment was thank you for coming over, and I hope it's not the last time. And I sincerely mean that. I hope it's not the last time. I think it does a world of good for these players.
I think one of the things that has to be focused on is that we have to. There's no point in going over there to get beat. We have to get. If we're going, we have to treat it seriously. We have to take the full first team squad and go and compete. Because on too many occasions we've been over to America, particularly in the past, and got absolutely scalped by teams that wouldn't even be in the same stratosphere with us once we got our fitness up. People hate losers, especially in America. We have to go over there and win these games. Now, it's probably unfortunate that we're already set up to go back to Philly. Then Peter Lawwell meets this nutcase in the Hyatt Hotel and thinks, oh Christ, let's steer clear. That's unfortunate. But listen, we have to go over there and compete with these teams. Barcelona do it, Chelsea do it, Man City do it. They're understanding that people want to back winners. It's as simple as that. So if we're going to do it, we either do it really seriously and we structure it perfectly, or we didn't do it at all.
See, the difference is that the Barcelonas, the Chelseas, and the Real Madrids, like we faced last season, they're already in the group stages. They don't need to worry about qualifiers and early SPL games. Their leagues start midway through August, so they can spend the entire month. The entire team can be here for an entire month, touring around, getting acclimated, so on and so forth. They can't do sort of like the whirlwind quick jaunt tour over here, which I agree, completely is disruptive. So, but I take your point. We can't come over here with the second team of with a bunch of players with 59 or 57 on and trying to get into the first team when they're likely just going to return to Lennoxtown. Once we get into a position once again, which I feel we will, where we're getting automatic bids into the group stages of the Champions League, we can be a bit more liberal, a bit more loose with it. But I still think that it needs to be strategic with it, and I definitely take your point that it needs to be more of a full team that's going to come over here and be competitive. But I think that it was useful to come over and play against a full Real Madrid side, because I think a lot of these players saw that and said, we can step up to these players. We're not that outmatched in spite of the scoreline with it. Yeah. Speaking of which, Dublin Decider coming up versus Liverpool in August. What the hell are we deciding?
I'm lost. I have no idea. I saw Neil Lennon was over in Dublin last week and they were promoting this Dublin Decider thing. I'm completely lost as to what we are deciding or what it's for or anything like that. I understand. I think the points that you make up with the American thing and the Australian thing are as equally prevalent to Ireland in terms of, I think we've kind of abandoned Ireland in the last few years, and that we should be looking. We've got a massive supporter base in Ireland, fully guys who get up at the crack of dawn, and girls as well, to come over on boats and planes and all that kind of thing. And I know a guy, Conor Fallon, got priced at the cup final because Ryanair seen the cup final and went boom with the prices and all that kind of thing. When these guys are, the dedication that they show is incredible. And I think that, while it's all right to say, okay, let's go and play Liverpool and Dublin and try to cash in and both teams' support over there, then we should be looking at places like Cork, and we should be looking at places like Limerick, and we should be looking at places like Belfast. Celtic have enormous support in the occupied six counties, and it's about time we gave them something back. I mean, we might actually be playing Cliftonville in July, and we know Chris McGuigan's loyalties will be divided on that one. Oof. But listen, what we're deciding, God only knows. But let's embrace Ireland once again. Look at the impact the Irish had on the founding of our football club. We wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for the country Ireland and the people that populate it. And it's about time we showed that bit of respect, and not just be going to Dublin, but let's get right round the country and let's take Celtic back to the people.
I agree completely. Speaking of Ryanair, if Ryanair is going to be in charge, just bear in mind you will be charged an extra $5 for every piece of pyro and an extra $10 for any banner that you're brought in, and you will be weighed. agree completely. I think that there's such a huge opportunity that's being passed up by sort of the indifference that Celtic has with many of the Irish supporters. I mean, how far is it from Shannon or Limerick, all the way up to Celtic Park? Yet you can't get a Celtic TV broadcast, live, and who knows how difficult it is to get the games. And I mean, for supporters in Kerry or Cork, and there is a sizable Celtic support in Cork, for them to drive, all the way from Cork up to Glasgow every weekend, or even fly. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, they might as well be on the continent itself. I mean, you need to make it easier for them to support the club. And then when you do have these friendlies, I mean, granted, it's against Liverpool, and half of Ireland, admittedly, their first team is Liverpool. But you need to make it accessible. You need to make it affordable. The Celtic Tigers gone. Ireland is going through a rough economic time. Open it up. I mean, let's really try and accomplish what we're trying to set out to do, which is expose Celtic to the most amount of people, not just people who have a bit of cash laying around and figure it's a day out and never support the club again.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've got a solution for this. Let's bring Seamus Cummins over, and let's get him in the pubs and the clubs in Limerick and Cork and all that. And when big EPL games are on, mine at Liverpool, let's get him in there, reminding these fuckers that why are you supporting teams that have oppressed your country for 800 years? Let's get back tugging the heartstrings, and let's remind these people what Celtic are all about. And because I'll tell you right now, like the Premiership went in there and basically steamrolled their support into their different clubs and whatever. Celtic need to be aggressive with that, and let's concentrate on the North as well. I mean, the North. Every time we go to Ireland, it's always you forget the security issues. I mean, for Christ's sake, we've had a peace process in Ireland now since 1998, a Good Friday Agreement. Celtic could go over there. I mean, there's a massive support in West Belfast. There's a massive support in Derry and the Ardoyne and all these places like that. I mean, these people have been coming over to Celtic Park since time immemorial.
Yep.
Your guys from Monaghan, Jim Greenan, Jim Merrin from Belfast. These guys have been coming over to Celtic. They've never went for the Premiership dollar. They've never went and said, let's just go to Old Trafford and all that kind of thing. Let's go and back them once again.
Yep. And
of course, they can go down to Dublin and all the rest of it. But as we all know, Dublin's an expensive place. It's pretty expensive for the ticket. I think €25 is the cheapest ticket for the next time, and you're probably paying, €5, €6, €7 for a beer and stuff like that.
Who's going to do that?
Well, that's it. I mean, it's. I looked at it on the basis of saying maybe I could just go over for a day, something like that. Not being a guy much means. And Ryanair are charging £125 for a return flight one day.
Yeah.
So that's your return flight. Then you're €6 into the city centre on the bus. Then you're for about €600 in drink. So then, I mean, look, it's not affordable for a lot of people. Now these games are obviously not for people like me who live in Edinburgh, or people like you who live in wherever it is you live. And these are the people. The people in Ireland to go and support them. As simple as that.
Yeah, no question. I think that, if they're going to decide anything, let's once and for all, considering we're playing against Liverpool, let's once and for all have this game decide who's saying you'll never walk alone first. And then just be done with it. Want to see, it'd be interesting to see who would turn up for that. Next topic, where does the double from this year rank amongst the list of achievements? And obviously we're going to compare it against, league titles, but other doubles, as of recently, last decade or even 2 decades. Where does this stack up?
It stacks up with pretty much anything that I've seen in my lifetime. I mean, obviously, the great double with Mark in the early years was the Centenary double, which was absolutely phenomenal because, it was like Celtic have this kind of thing that follows the club, but just at the right times, things seem to happen. We're fantastic at winning one-off trophies. We're fantastic at getting up the establishment. We win the Coronation Cup. And to win a double in our Centenary was phenomenal. So then, to get the 125th anniversary and to have all the celebrations that went around that and St Mary's and obviously then beating Barcelona and then to round it off with a double was absolutely phenomenal. But it kind of feels as though, I don't know how it feels to you, Graham, but it feels to me as though the club have kind of sort of not even realised that, and they've not really, I'm not so much like cashing in on it, but in terms of, recognising just how big an achievement it was. But in terms of, I tell you what it really did for me, because the 6 weeks leading up to us winning that cup, all we heard about was Derek Adams is a great manager, Terry Butcher's a great manager, Steve Lomas is a great manager. What did they win? Nothing. Zero. Zilch. Neil Lennon won 2 out of 3 trophies, and we probably should have won 3, but we played crap against St Mirren. So to go into a cup final against a Hibs team with, a huge incentive in terms of getting a massive monkey off their back, equivalent to the Chicago Cubs, then, to go there and just sweep them aside, just swat them like a fly was absolutely phenomenal. And I think anybody who watched that, whether they were in the bars of Philadelphia or on the terraces of Hampden, that was as one of the top days in Celtic Football Club history.
Yeah, I think that what the lesson that we've learned over the past couple of years is that so many people have this idea that, because we're so much better on paper, we should just go into a lot of these cup ties and just win them all, with relative ease. It's not that easy. I don't care who the manager is, Neil Lennon. I don't care how far ahead we are. These things don't happen on a frequent basis. And there's a reason why, because it's incredibly, incredibly hard. Like you said, we probably should have won the treble, but, there's going to be off days. And to have that confluence of being on for every single time that and these teams that we're going up against, they're no mugs. They're not laying down for us. They're going to go out and because we're Celtic and especially since we are the big, let's not kid ourselves. We are the big show in town. We're the only show in town. So every club that goes up against us is going to be ready for it. They're going to play that much harder. And as a result,
this is something that's perpetrated by certain aspects of the media about Celtic being better on paper. Who was better on paper? Pablo Picasso. Nobody else, right? Football is about what happens on the pitch, right? Simple as that. And we showed this season that if we let our guard down, we will lose football matches, right? That simple. But when it really mattered, in that cup final, we showed up. And that's what we wanted to see. We wanted to see show up. And to win a double in the 125th anniversary of the club is absolutely phenomenal. We're in a period right now where history has been awakened by people like the Celtic Graves and the podcasts that Chris McGregor are doing and stuff. And this will be a double that we'll talk about on podcasts or whatever the medium might be, 50 years' time or whatever, because it's a phenomenal achievement to win a double. And if it wasn't, then you'd be able to win it every year, but you can't. We won it in 2007, we won it in 2004. They didn't come along that often, and they should be celebrated, and they were celebrated. It was great to see, because you talk about the history and that, look at what happened at the start of that cup final. Hibs had the most horrifically Williams Hill sponsored display I've ever seen at a football match. What did we have? 1888 and a big picture of Brother Wilfred. That's what it's all about. That is what it's all about. For a man to found a football club 125 years previous, and for that football club to still be at the top of the game in Scotland and winning the big trophies, it's a remarkable achievement, and we should never be overlooked.
I think you're 100% right on the club missing the mark in terms of, and I know what you're saying in terms of like merchandising or marketing or whatever. We don't want to have that sort of overhyped scenario, but it's almost like it was just sort of breezed over. Right. Okay. St. Mary's, Barcelona, all that. Okay. And on to the next thing, or just sort of apathy. There really wasn't an exploitation that in my opinion, I think there should have been. That there should have been an ongoing celebration. The 125 for 125, or whatever that is. There's just such a disconnect with that. It was a missing. I think it really missed the mark. There was an opportunity to really bring everybody in and sort of embrace what it all meant. And it seemed like there was the St. Mary's event, which was phenomenal, and the anniversary kits that came out, 3 new kits, and of course 3 new kits coming out next year. But out with that, what was there?
Yeah, on the centenary year, you felt like you were on a journey. There was loads of things came out. I remember they had photographs of the current Celtic team looking like the first Celtic team. They had the Celtic Story, which was a theatre play that was a musical that was on at the Pavilion in Glasgow, which I seen the night before the Scottish Cup final, was absolutely phenomenal. This time, it's not really happened like that. And as I said, it's a kind of missed opportunity because we could, this is a remarkable football club with a remarkable history, and these kind of events should always be, I remember even looking back at the history books, we had a big, huge gala dinner and stuff like that for the 50th anniversary in 1938 and stuff like that. And, these things can never be overlooked. It's a wonderful football club, and, we should never take it for granted. But we should always be kind of looking to maximise the potential to put that Celtic story around the world.
No question about it. Next topic: should we up the level that we are spending on players to a slightly higher notch, given the recent influx in cash?
No, I think we're exactly the business model that we have got in is phenomenal, and I'm somebody like yourself who's been critical of certain aspects of the club, Peter Law and stuff like that. But the one thing that they've got right is the model that they're doing now, which is the model that was kind of first implemented by Ajax. If you look at a team like Ajax, they won 3 European Cups in a row in the 70s because they're the genius at the head of it in Johan Cruyff. And then they kind of went through a lull when that, like most great teams do and stuff like that. And they were able to rebuild the club again and win another Champions League, another European Cup with a team of players that went right through Europe, were sold on, and then went on to win other big trophies with other big clubs and stuff like that.
Think about that team, that 95 team. The players that were on that team, it's amazing.
Oh, Patrick Kluivert, Clarence Seedorf. I mean, it's phenomenal. I mean, and that is the model that Celtic, have done, and it quite kind of astounds me actually that on a smaller level, the rest of Scottish football doesn't actually just copy what we do.
Yeah, I mean, it would make complete sense, but they're stuck in that mid-'80s sort of let's keep everybody organized and let's play as this static unit.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we were fortunate, or you could say we worked for it when we were able to put this in place by selling Aidan McGeady. And Aidan McGeady, was a perfect example of somebody brings through the ranks. He's obviously a top football player. We sell him for £10 million. He goes to Spartak Moscow. We reinvest that in the infrastructure, in the players that we bring in. And we look to be on the verge of selling maybe 2 players this season. It's going to be an astronomical amount in terms of for Celtic. And for 2 players, if you're taking it's going to be Hooper and Wanyama, it cost the club in the region about £3.1 million. And you've got to argue that you could be getting a minimum of £15 million for the pair of them. And, why on earth would need to change that? I mean, understandably, it's probably the criticism it would be, if you sign 4 players, then you're probably not going to get 4 guarantees. But if you get 2 of that, I'm quite happy with that.
No question.
You look at the players we brought in this season, a couple of hits, a couple of misses, but, the club's financially sound. And, we could easily be looking at a scenario where £50 million comes into this club over the summer.
And I think that, I agree on all points. And I think that the reinvestment in the club, I mean, we stand to probably bring in about $15 million if the 2 players that you're talking about are sold on. I mean, that's where I would minimum value, the influx of that cash. But if we're going to start shopping in that sort of upper echelon, I mean, the $1 to $2 million and maybe even a £3 million player if they're special, coming from a certain place. If we up that to the $5 to $6 to $7 million player, next thing, we're going to be competing with some of the bigger clubs that can start a bidding war. Whereas, the players that we're bringing in just now, I mean, we're in a nice spot where the clubs that we're competing with, they have other options and they have money in reserve and they can look elsewhere if a player wants to come to Celtic and play in the Champions League. But those players in that £5, £6, £7 million rating are going to command higher wages as well. And that sort of compounds the spending with that. Like you, I've been very critical of some of the spending practices and the lack of activity, but I think that it's absolutely vital that we stay in this market and plan for the future as if, worst case scenario, as if we don't get into the Champions League, as if we don't have that influx of money to refill the coffers. Because, if that does happen and we've spent all the money that we've built up over the past year, we're going to be in a bad spot again. I think you're right. If we rebuild and we reinvest in this price point, which has been effective, I think that we also need to reinvest in some of these nucleus players like a Joe Ledley, up their wages, to keep them in and do that, sort of across the board. The players that perform, that come in and perform and want to stay here, up their wages, sweeten the pot, if you will, to a certain extent, and show the younger players that if you come up and you perform and you execute, this is there waiting for you.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the hardest thing about this kind of policy is it takes a bit balls to get started because the progress is invisible.
Right.
When you first restructure your scouting network and you have guys all over the world looking at players and that, it's going to take time before you actually see, the progress that they're making. It's not going to happen overnight. And so that's what kind of happened when Celtic took John Park and the restructuring and, built Lennoxtown and all that kind of thing. But now the first player that kind of came out of that was probably James Forrest. He's obviously looking like a top quality player. And then the other side of the project is to go out and find your players like your Wanyamas and like your Gary Hoopers and your Kayals and Izagiri and all that kind of thing. And that is you simply do that by scouring the world for talent. But at the end of the day, of course, in that market, with the prices that you're paying, you are gambling, But it certainly looks like we've got the right guys who are scouting the right players because it can't be argued that it hasn't been anything other than a mitigated success for Celtic. And it's the only way we'll be able to compete in the Champions League. Because we'll never be able to outspend the Real Madrids and the Barcelonas and teams like that.
Very well put. Next topic. Switching to summer football for Scotland. Obviously, this is a debate every few years, especially after a long and hard winter and the pitches are just absolutely destroyed by the end of the season. But, there is a void there. Yes or no for you? Summer football switching over to the summer schedule?
Yes, definitely. We have one of the most ridiculous scenarios I think I've ever heard in my life in terms of football, which is my son currently plays for Spartans, who are a kind of semi-professional team in Edinburgh, whose season is about to shut down. Now, that means that in one of the best summers we've had in a long, long time, we do not have our players playing football. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous. This is the time right now where people should be playing games and they should be sitting on football pitches for a long period of time being coached. Because when it gets to the winter and it's November, December, you can't coach kids because you need to have them running about. You need to have them keeping warm.
Yeah.
In terms of the actual top level of football, I mean, first of all, why are we competing with the EPL on any basis? It's a different stratosphere. Let's forget it. We're competing them with the time slots for TV games, all that kind of thing. Second of all, more people will go to football matches when the weather's like this. I mean, that's a no-brainer. Thirdly, you'll have no matches that will be called off for bad weather. Fourthly, you'll never have to switch on your floodlights with the late nights that we get here and stuff like that, so you'll save a fortune in electricity bills. And I just think we would re-energise. If you look at the re-energising Irish football, because they moved to summer, let's not forget, Irish football, in terms of soccer, as they call over there, is probably the third most popular sport in Ireland. Mm-hmm. Yet it's going through a renaissance because they moved to summer football. Their teams are now getting into Europe and stuff like that. Well, that never really happened.
Look at what's happened in the MLS, okay? The MLS has a very similar sort of conundrum that is experienced in Scotland just now. Granted, they're not competing. Soccer, as we call it over here, is not competing with an EPL that's that close and that's that competitive for eyeballs and for ticket prices. But nonetheless, we're competing against the NFL, which is, sort of our first sport at this point, let's be honest. And people will not turn up in the middle of winter, let's say January, February, in a Seattle, in a New England, just outside of Boston. I mean, they're having blizzard after blizzard. It would be an unmitigated disaster. And there's still people calling for us to over here to switch to, more of the traditional FIFA club schedule. It's absolute nonsense. Look at the turnout that's happening in the MLS just now. 55 people for a normal MLS game turned up last night in Seattle to watch Seattle play against Vancouver. Most weeks, if you compare the attendances at the MLS games to leagues around the world, we're higher than Italy. And many weeks we're higher than France. And this is for a league and for a sport that's playing fifth fiddle behind NASCAR. So
yep.
What the MLS is doing is setting itself up for more success, for less competition. I mean, at this time point, if you're not an NBA fan or an NHL fan, I mean, what else is there to watch?
From a purely insular point of view, in terms of Celtic, if you have summer football and you then are able to have the time slots for live games that the EPL currently command, exactly. And we have a game at 4 o'clock on a Sunday, you're guaranteed to bring more people into your Celtic supporters club when the game kicks off at 11 o'clock your time than you are at 7 a.m.
No question about it.
It's absolutely, and you can make it an event. I mean, the kind of glory years of the North American Federation were when we had 6:05 kickoffs in Scotland. Mm-hmm. So that you could attract your punters in at 1:05 for a lunch and a few drinks and all that kind of thing, watch the game at a normal time. Didn't try and tell me for 1 second that the clubs aren't being killed by these ridiculous kickoff times, and also the fans as well, having to travel up to places like Dundee and Aberdeen and Dingwall at 12 o'clock on a Sunday is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah,
it's absolutely ridiculous.
And you can't ask yourself why the attendances aren't going down. You can't be serious and ask yourself that.
Yeah, and also, I mean, everybody's obsessed with Sky. Sky would be desperate to have something to put on their screens during the summer.
What are people watching over there just now? Is it cricket? Is that what people are watching?
God knows. But I tell you, that and the fact that if you were getting that kind of coverage with Sky and BT or EastGate or whoever it might be, and it's completely uninterrupted and it's not got any competition, more sponsors will put money into your game.
Exactly. They want to get their message out.
Bigger exposure.
Exactly. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And as I say, and the crux of that being, of course, if stadiums are fuller because it's better conditions and it's easier to get to and it's better kickoff times and all that kind of thing. Well, you're enhancing your product.
And from a Celtic perspective, no longer, if we are going to have to go through these qualifiers to get in the Champions League, no longer are we fearful of the Scandinavian teams who are halfway through the middle of their season and fully fit and all that sort of thing. Because we'll be in the middle of our season as well. Do your overseas tours in the winter months. Go over to Florida in January. It's beautiful in Florida in January or California or whatever. You'll have the time off. And I think it makes more sense. You can go to Australia, for that time period.
Yeah, you could even go to Dubai because I mean most of the players seem to be well acquainted with it. So
That's true.
they'd be well kent faces, as they say.
They'll already be there. Fantastic. They don't even need to fly. Next topic. Should we be signing players right now? Does it concern you if we start seeing our sort of alleged primary targets go elsewhere at this stage? Obviously, it's only a month until Champions League qualifiers. So if these players are leaving, I mean, we're going to need to sort of replace them sooner rather than later. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of our targets, I mean, I thought it was, like Neil Lennon's over in Dublin last week and suddenly we're linked to the whole Ireland team. I think that's just kind of, horses for courses. Who our primary targets are, I don't know. I mean, sometimes, the media will speculate about players and you think, and then it's like, oh, we're going to get him. Oh, no, he's waiting, turn Celtic down and, this kind of stuff. And then you find out, well, we're not even interested in the guy. Reality now in football, I think, for most clubs is economics. It's the fact that if you're going to bring in a guy on 20 grand, 25 grand a week, and this is going to be your marquee signing, you're not going to do it in June and give him 100 grand for sitting on his arse on a beach. People just are not going to do that anymore. I even read a newspaper article today that suggested that Man United have done a deal with Real Madrid to bring back Ronaldo for 65 million quid, but it won't be actually signed until the 8th of August. Now you've got to look at that and say, what's Ronaldo going to be on? Well, Rooney's on 250 grand a week, so that would be his probably optimum fee.
Got to be.
So by signing him on August the 8th, that's Man United save 2 million quid. I mean, that's as they say in America, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ideally, of course, you'd like to get all your signings in, and you could have them bedded in for pre-season and ready to go, in the Champions League qualifiers and stuff like that. But unfortunately, that's not affordable for the kind of market we're in. It's only affordable for the Dundee Uniteds and whoever who are signing players for, Queen of the South and players like that. Extra few quid on the wages when they're releasing players isn't going to bother them. But in our terms, I mean, I have to be honest. When I was a younger man, I would have been panicking about signings left, right, and centre almost every day of my life. But now, I'm quite happy with the way the club does the transfer business. I'm quite happy with the guys we sign, and I'm sure there'll be 2 or 3 good signings within the next maybe 4-6 weeks.
I would hope so. I mean, we can't do what we've done over the past couple of years, especially in integral positions where we wait until August 30th to make these signings or whatever, especially if Gary Hooper's going to be gone, which I think he will be, and perhaps Victor Wanyama. If we see a situation where they're gone in the midst of these Champions League qualifiers and we have nobody to replace them at that point, we're in a world of hurt. I mean, it's very – I mean, the most important thing, maybe of the entire season, but certainly at this point, is getting through these qualifiers. I mean, it'd be an unmitigated disaster if we went out of any sort of European competition. Europa League, it's second fiddle. It's not the greatest, but I mean, it's sustainable. But we can't bring somebody in on August 30th and without the benefit of a preseason training, getting bedded in with the side, figuring out how we play. But it's not just plug and play. You just can't click in, especially a prolific striker, which we are going to need if Gary Hooper leaves. So I think that although I agree with your point, we can't be hasty. We can't just bring in whoever it is on the front end, but we're in a different position than Man United or Real Madrid, where they're already in the group stage of the Champions League. They can afford to be patient. We need to have some sort of, and I'm sure, like you said, I'm confident in what the club does. I'm sure that they have a list of targets. They've already thought about this already. John Park is an absolute genius in this aspect of it. If we bring in 2, 3, 4 players, if we hit on 2 of them, I think we've done good business, especially in the market that we're shopping in. But I'd rather it be done sooner rather than later. I'm not panicking at this point, but I'm expecting to see something over the next few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's in terms of the urgency of the matter, I think the urgency comes into one thing: money. If you're going to give the guy that you're after the money he wants, he'll be on the plane before you even offer them the deal. It's as simple as that, and he'll be there, boom, and that'll be it finished. We've seen in the past clubs huge splurges. I mean, when you're in the market we're in, you're going to have protracted negotiations. There's going to be a lot of ins and outs and all that kind of thing. It's no Chelsea under Abramovich where you just go in and offer them extortionate amounts of money and they're there the next game day. That's not the work we're in. But what I will say is that there's absolutely no way, given the amount of money that Celtic brought in from the Champions League last season, that they're certainly going to be sitting there kind of hedging their bets. Because they know that the way that we can progress as a football club and bring in actual real money that can protect the infrastructure of the club, that can progress the club, evolve the club, all that, and to be as prepared as possible for that has to be the absolute, prerequisite number 1 priority for this club during the summer.
Yep, no question about it. I think that whoever it is that sort of winds up leaving, and who knows what the timeline's going to be. It's not that convenient. We can't just say, okay, right, Champions League qualifiers are starting next Tuesday, so Gary Hooper's got to leave now. He may play, in some of these games, or he may still be with us at the beginning of the season. The markets that are going to be shopping for him tend to wait a little bit longer. It's just so unpredictable, what's going to take place with this. But I think that if we get bogged down in specific players and trying to bring in, quote unquote, the next Gary Hooper, I think that we might be missing the boat on future growth. And I think that some of the targets that we've been linked to, who knows how accurate they are. But I think some of the players that we've been linked to speaks to more of a long-term vision that Neil Lennon has for the club, not just trying to replicate exactly what the past couple of years have been, which I think is good. I'm liking sort of seeing that. Next topic. Will Scott Brown be able to play more than half a season again? Your thoughts, Paul?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's been handled well. I mean, I know the kind of injury is a bit bizarre in terms of it looked like he had to keep playing to keep it going when we wanted to play him for the 2 Juventus games. I think that was the right decision, benefit hindsight or not. I think his actual physical fitness, injuries aside, is probably the best at the club. I mean, you look what he done when he came back in at the end of the season, having no play for 3 months. Came in and absolutely waltzed through the games, was putting a phenomenal performance in the cup final, and I can't disagree with the way the club's handled it so far.
See, I would agree with you from the standpoint that, well, first off, let me just solidify my take on this. He is the Celtic captain. He means what we saw in this spring really solidifies when he is missing. There's a huge element of the psyche of this club that's missing. The dry run that we had throughout the spring was just absolutely dire, and the effect that he has on this club was solidified in his Scottish Cup final performance. I mean, some of his footwork was phenomenal for a player that hadn't played in months, but it wasn't a situation where we electively shut him down. We had to. I mean, the games against Juventus, he had absolutely nothing left. I mean, essentially had to be carried off the pitch. Figuratively,
So what you're saying is we shouldn't have bothered to get him fit for the Juventus games. Then we should have just let him go.
Yes, I was calling for this last fall.
You would say, so you were saying that before the Juventus games that shut down Scott Brown.
Yes, I said it. While we were in the midst of the Champions League, and I was made a mug because he was absolutely immense throughout those Champions League qualifiers. But I said if there's something degenerative, that's the operative word here. No pun intended. If there's something degenerative with what's going on with him, then we need to deal with it. We need to set him up in a situation where he can heal as completely and comprehensively as possible and come back as soon as possible in the best stage possible. He never had the surgery, to my knowledge, or he didn't have the surgery that they were talking about last fall. But I said, and I mean, there was... Obviously, there was a counter argument to that. I said shut him down. We do have cover for him in terms of Victor Wanyama, in terms of Joe Ledley. But there's a scenario now where, with that wording, degenerative, there were reports that he was limping off the field, after the Scottish Cup final. I think that we need to start thinking long-term about Scott Brown's career. He means too much to this club, and I think that if you sort of dialed him back a notch, where he's not this chicken with his head cut off, running all over the park. If you put somebody next to him, in sort of a role to do a lot of the running for him, much in the mold of like a Pirlo, I think that his benefit expands wider than just this hard man wannabe Roy Keane that he's been throughout his career. He's got exceptional vision. I think his footwork is immense, and he can ping a pass. He really can. I think that would extend his career and make him a better footballer.
Well, first of all, I mean, I don't think I've heard the word degenerative anymore since I read Tuesdays with Maury, but listen, I think you're being harsh on Scott Brown. I don't think. I mean, I agree he has been kind of aggressive streaking him, but it's that aggression that makes him. Yes, he's a top quality player. Yes, he's got skill. Perhaps he can't get the lung busting runs that we were used to in the past and what he's seen with Hibs and why we signed him in the first place. But listen, he's got the greatest guy in the world to actually tell him how to do it. It's Neil Lennon. He played till he was 37 and played pretty much the same role as Scott Brown's playing, albeit probably less mobile than Scott Brown. Yet he was able to do it, and he without losing his aggression, without any of that kind of thing. And yeah, the injury has to be managed, but we can't have a scenario where it's just like, we'll wheel in Scott Brown for a Champions League game, then we'll leave him at the SPL. That's how you'll end up killing his career.
Listen, I'm not saying that we need a Scott Brown with a handbrake on. What I'm saying is somebody needs to sit down with Scott Brown and explain to him, look, you want to be playing, till you're 34, 35 years old at the top level. We need to sort of be more strategic and be smarter about how you're playing. And I agree with you. A lot of his aggression is what makes him great. I don't want to take, that sort of mentality out. I just want to, I want to have a more thought out aggression. I want him to pick his spots instead of just getting stuck into anything that'll move, like a dog chasing a stick and pointing fingers in people's faces. I think a lot of it is excessive and is not necessary. If he can be more strategic and thought out with it, I think that it would do not just the longevity of his career a world of good, but his effectiveness on a game by game basis. I think he'll be a better footballer as a result.
But sure, are you saying that we've not seen any signs of that this season, that he's actually is doing that? He's curbing that kind of side.
When he's played, and that's a concern that I have. At this point, are we going to start seeing him, for half a season? Are we going to start seeing him, just like dog chasing a stick for half a season, and then he wears himself out, and then we got to shut him down for 3 months? That's what I don't want.
Scott Brown for mayor.
Fantastic stuff. Well, hopefully everybody enjoyed this first 10 in a row podcast, and please let us know what your thoughts are. You can reach out to Paul at PaulLarkin74 on Twitter, and myself at BTW Celtic Show. Beyond the Waves will still continue, but this is, like I said, this is a project that Paul and I have talked about for a little while, and we're really excited to bring out there.
Season.
Exactly. This is our silly season. So let us know what your thoughts are. But until next time, where we go for 10 in a row once again. For Paul Larkin, I'm Graham Wilson saying hail and keep the faith. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.